The silence in our house had weight. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind that filled rooms, pressed into corners, turned every small sound into an intrusion. Forks on plates, the hum of the fridge, the click of her phone lighting up at night. It was the sound of a marriage drifting into static. Sarah and I had been married 8 years. We used to talk about everything: travel, movies, stupid things we saw online. But now, most days, our conversations barely lasted longer than a weather report. Morning, late night? Yeah, that was the rhythm. Predictable, polite, dead. I kept telling myself it wasn't her fault. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. It was life. Work had turned into a meat grinder, the kind where success just meant the privilege of another 70-hour week, deadlines that bled into weekends, clients who called at midnight, coworkers who slept under their desks. I used to come home proud. Now, I came home empty. And Sarah, she was always patient. At least, she had been. For years, she'd put up with the long nights and the broken plans. "It's just a phase," she'd say. "We'll get through it." But the phase never ended. It just calcified. Then one night, I realized I didn't remember the last time she'd said goodnight. The first signs were small. She started working late. She was suddenly on deadline, though I never saw her laptop open at home. Then she joined a gym, something she'd sworn she hated. Late sessions, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. "I'll be back soon." Her phone, once left charging on the kitchen counter, became an extension of her hand. She'd tilt it away from me when she texted. She'd turn the screen down on the table, claiming it was just a habit. If you've ever lived through that kind of slow drift, the way every normal behavior starts to feel coded, suspicious, you'll understand. It's like your brain starts running two realities at once, the innocent one and the paranoid one. And the paranoid one always wins. It wasn't jealousy that got me. It was fear. The kind of fear that whispers, "You're losing her. She's already gone, and you're too tired to notice." I tried talking to her once, clumsy, defensive, already doomed. "Is everything okay between us?" I asked. She looked up from her phone.
"Why wouldn't it be?"
"I don't know. You've just been distant." She smiled, but it was thin, practiced. "Work's been crazy. You know how it is." "I do," I said quietly. "Maybe that's the problem." She didn't answer, just went back to scrolling. And that was the last time I brought it up. A few weeks later, I started noticing her schedule didn't make sense. She'd leave for yoga in leggings and come back smelling like clay and detergent. Her receipts showed late-night Uber rides to the industrial district. One night, I followed her location through the shared phone plan. She was nowhere near her office. My chest felt tight. I told myself it was nothing. I even Googled the address, just a strip of warehouses and art studios. But the next night, when she came home late and said, "We had to finish some stuff at work," I didn't hear a lie. I heard the pause before the lie. That's when I decided to hire someone. Not because I wanted to catch her, because I couldn't take not knowing anymore. Barnes came recommended by a coworker, an ex-cop who'd gone private. He had the personality of a locked filing cabinet, gray hair, pressed shirt, voice like sandpaper. When I met him, he slid a legal pad across the table. "Names, places, routines," he said. "Give me everything." I hesitated. "This feels wrong." "So does being lied to," he said. That line sold me. I told him everything. Her schedule, her gym, her office, the nights she stayed out, the changes in her mood. He listened without comment, writing in slow, blocky letters. When I finished, he said, 3 weeks. That's how long it takes to know for sure. How much? 10 grand. Half now, half later. It felt obscene, but I paid it because you can't put a price on peace of mind until you try. Those 3 weeks stretched like a year. Every night, I'd lie awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering if she was dreaming about someone else. Every text notification on her phone made my stomach twist. Every late-night shower, every half-smile, every distracted sigh evidence. At work, I was useless. I'd stare at spreadsheets and imagine the moment she'd tell me. The calm tone, I didn't mean for it to happen. The soft, practiced guilt. I rehearsed the scene 100 times, like preparing for an execution. Sometimes I'd imagine forgiving her. Sometimes I'd imagine walking out without a word. Both felt impossible. And through it all, Barnes stayed silent. Until one night, my phone rang. It was 9:12 p.m. I was sitting in my car outside our house, too drained to go inside yet. The caller ID said, "Barnes Investigations." "Mr. Evans," his voice rasped. "We need to talk. In person. My office. 10 a.m. Just that. No tone, no hint. Just a flat statement that landed like a verdict. I tried to joke. "You could have just texted me bad news." He didn't laugh. In person, he repeated. Please don't bring your wife. Then he hung up. I sat there for a long time after that call, staring at our dark living room window. Inside, Sarah was moving. I could see her silhouette pass by the curtain. Her phone glowed in her hand. I imagined what she was texting. He'll find out soon. We'll figure it out. I love you. Or maybe nothing like that at all. Maybe she was just browsing something harmless. Maybe the paranoia had finally eaten through what little trust was left. The irony was that I didn't even want to be right. I wanted Barnes to tell me I was crazy, that I'd wasted my money, that my wife still loved me, and I'd ruined it by doubting her. But nobody pays 10 grand for reassurance. They pay for confirmation. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and counted the spaces between her breaths. At one point, she stirred, whispered something in her sleep. It sounded like my name. For a second, I thought about canceling the meeting, pretending everything was fine, letting the silence be our truce. Then I remembered the glow of her phone under the covers, the way she'd smiled at something unseen, and I knew I couldn't. The truth was already walking toward us, whether I wanted it or not. At 10 a.m., I'd walk into Barnes's beige office and ask him the question every betrayed person rehearses in their nightmares. Who is he? But that was still hours away. For now, I just watched her sleep, the early sunlight spilling across her face, and wondered when exactly we'd stop being on the same side. Barnes's office looked like every generic detective office you've ever imagined. Beige walls, blinds half closed, the faint smell of old coffee and copier toner. The kind of place where truth didn't come as revelation. It came stapled, time-stamped, and emotionally bankrupt. He was already sitting behind his desk when I walked in, a manila folder open in front of him. He didn't smile. Mr. Evans, he said, motioning to the chair across from him. Saturday. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then he said, before we start whatever happens in here, you handle it calmly. No yelling, no calling her. You understand? My throat tightened. That bad? He just sighed. You paid for the truth. I'm giving you the truth. My palms were slick. Just show me, please. He hesitated, then flipped the folder around. Photos printed on glossy paper, spread across the desk. Sarah in her car. Sarah at her office. Sarah walking into a building I didn't recognize. My stomach clenched as he slid them toward me. Mr. Evans, he said, your wife is painfully boring. I blinked. What? She works late. At her office. She goes to the gym. At the gym. Those late-night drives you were worried about? She's going to a 24-hour pottery studio in the industrial district. Makes a lot of mugs. All ugly. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He raised an eyebrow. That's the affair, Mr. Evans. Clay. For a second, the air left my lungs. Relief hit so fast it made me dizzy. She's not cheating? Not even close. I laughed shaky, disbelieving. You're serious? Barnes nodded. Dead serious. She's got the least exciting secret life I've ever seen. I've tailed accountants who were more suspicious. I sank back into the chair. Oh my God. He gave me a moment, watching the tension leave my body. Then he said, quietly, that's the good news. I froze. The good news? He closed the folder, folded his hands, and looked at me like a doctor about to give a diagnosis. The bad news, he said, is that this case just got complicated. What do you mean? He leaned back. I run this agency with a partner. Name's Russo. We split cases. 3 weeks ago, the same day you came to me, your wife came to him. I frowned. She what? She hired Russo. The words didn't make sense. You mean she also wanted someone followed? He nodded. Yeah, you. I sat there, blinking, trying to process that. Wait, Sarah hired a PI to follow me? Looks that way, he said, almost apologetic. She came into our office, same pitch, same concerns, said you'd been distant, working long hours, acting secretive. She thought you might be having an affair. My mouth went dry. She thought I was cheating. He gave a small shrug. You've been clocking 70-hour weeks. You stopped talking. You're moody. Classic signs, Mr. Evans. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Jesus Christ. The irony hit me like a gut punch. Both of us convinced the other was sneaking around. Both of us paranoid enough to hire strangers to confirm it. So, I said after a long pause, we're both idiots. Barnes almost smiled. That would have been my assessment. Yeah. Then what's the complicated part? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his laptop toward me. This, he said, is Russo's final report. He sent it to your wife this morning. The screen showed a grainy photo. I leaned closer. It was me sitting in this very office 3 weeks ago, across from Barnes. We were shaking hands. The timestamp in the corner said it all, the day I'd hired him. I don't understand, I said. That's just me, meeting you. Barnes sighed. Russo's been tailing you for weeks. That's the only suspicious thing he caught, you meeting with an unknown man in a private office. He flagged me as your accomplice. I stared at him numb. He thinks you and I are conspiring? According to the report, Barnes said, scrolling through a PDF, you're meeting regularly with me, his words, not mine, to conceal a long-term extramarital asset or coordinate logistics. He told your wife that you've been acting paranoid, secretive, and that this office is likely a safe house. He clicked another photo, me walking out of the building, head down, phone in hand. His recommendation, Barnes said, was that your wife confront you with this evidence. I let out a hollow laugh. So she's got proof that I'm cheating because I hired you to prove she wasn't. Pretty much. I pressed my hands over my face. This is insane. Welcome to my Tuesdays, Barnes muttered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I looked around his office, the ticking wall clock suddenly deafening. I paid you $10,000, I said slowly, to prove my wife wasn't cheating, and all I've done is give her proof that I was. He nodded grimly. That's the situation. Yeah. Something inside me cracked, then not from anger, but from the absurdity of it all. Do you know how ridiculous this is? I said, almost laughing. Two people, both faithful, both too paranoid to ask each other a simple question, and we end up hiring the same damn company. Barnes smirked. We get that more than you'd think. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So now what? You talked to Russo? Clear it up? Already tried, he said. He's not answering his phone. Maybe he's embarrassed. Barnes didn't reply, just stared at the laptop, frowning slightly. Something wrong? I asked. He scrolled through the file. Yeah, maybe. Russo's notes are weird. There's stuff here that doesn't make sense. He turned the screen back toward me. Under subject observations, Russo had written, subject is aware of surveillance. Appears to recognize tail, possibly testing investigator response. Displays avoidance patterns consistent with prior counter-surveillance training. I frowned. Counter what? Means you acted like you knew someone was following you, Barnes said. Changed routes, doubled back, sat in parked cars, checked mirrors. Classic paranoia stuff. But I didn't, I said. He looked at me. You sure? That question hung in the air longer than it should have, because now that I thought about it, I had been looking over my shoulder lately. Not for anyone specific, just that weird sense of being watched. Barnes was still reading. It gets stranger. Russo's last note says, you met with an unknown male outside of client's residence. He attached a photo. He clicked. Another grainy image appeared me. Again, standing outside my house at night, talking to someone whose face was turned away. Who the hell is that? I asked. Beats me, Barnes said. The timestamp's from last Tuesday. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Last Tuesday I was in bed by 11. I didn't go outside. He looked skeptical. Security cameras? None. Then maybe it's a look-alike, he said flatly. But even he didn't sound convinced. I sat there, trying to process it all. My wife hires a PI to follow me. I hire one to follow her. They end up following each other, and somehow both get footage of things that shouldn't exist. What if... I hesitated. What if Russo's messing with us? Trying to milk both sides? Barnes rubbed his jaw. It'd be unethical, but not impossible. He's been sloppy lately. I nodded, more to myself than to him. Then maybe we stop this before it gets worse. He closed the laptop. I'll see what I can find. In the meantime, don't say anything to your wife. Not yet. Let me handle Russo. I stood to leave. My legs felt weak, like I'd just run a marathon without moving. At the door, I turned. Barnes, do you ever feel like your job ruins people? He looked up at me. No, he said. People ruin themselves. I just document it. I forced a smile. Comforting. Try to get some rest, he said. You'll need it. Outside, the air felt too bright, too sharp. I sat in my car and stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. Somewhere out there, my wife was probably sitting in her car doing the same thing. Both of us wondering if the other was lying. Both of us holding proof neither of us could trust. Maybe love doesn't die with betrayal. Maybe it dies with evidence. When I drove home that night, the city smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. Maybe it was the way the fluorescent lights in Barnes's office faded in my head, or the way the photo of me shaking his hand refused to be explained. Whatever it was, the air in the car felt thin and brittle. I rehearsed what I would say on the 5-minute ride from the commuter lot to my street. Honey, you won't believe what happened. We need to talk. This whole thing. The sentences all felt like props in someone else's play. None of them held the weight I felt. I pulled into the driveway and watched her move behind the curtains. For the first time in months, she looked human, tired, a little slumped, like someone who had been asked to smile too many times in a day, but human. The sight of her softened the raw tightness in my chest. For a ridiculous second, I almost considered letting it go. Let Barnes deal with Russo. Let whatever was happening dissolve under ordinary life. Then she opened the door. You're home early, she said, almost casual, like the word early could reach across the weeks and smooth them out. I saw Barnes, I said. The words tumbled out. He cleared you. He said pottery, mugs, ugly ones. Her face changed in a way that made a small, hollow sound in my sternum. Relief? Shame? Both. I told you, she said quietly. It's ridiculous, right? Clay and midnight glazes. They've got me making bird feeders at 2 a.m. sometimes. Then why did you hire Russo? I asked. The question landed harder than I expected. It sounded like accusation and apology at once. She flinched. I worried about you, she said. You've been... She gestured, the gesture taking in the late nights, the absent dinners, the way we slid past each other in our own home. I thought maybe you were shutting me out. I didn't want to be blindsided. Her voice broke. It's humiliating that we both did this. The humiliating symmetry of it sat between us, loud as a slamming door. We both stood there at the middle of our life and found we had the same question. When did we stop trusting the other? I laid the laptop on the kitchen counter. Barnes had sent me a scanned copy of Russo's report after I left. I had printed it out like evidence, like a relic. I pushed it toward her. He's claiming I met with Barnes to hide something. She skimmed the pages, eyes darting over the grainy photos Russo attached. When she reached the one of me standing outside the house at night with a dark figure, she stopped. When was that? Last Tuesday, I said. The night I met Barnes. She folded the pages like it would make sense if she could fold it smaller. Russo's sloppy, she said finally. But that photo... She looked up at me, eyes sharp in a way I hadn't seen for weeks. That's not your neighbor. That's not a stranger either. What do you mean? She tapped the image. Look at the jacket, the collar, the way he holds his phone. I've seen that pattern before. Where? At the pottery studio, she answered. 2 months ago. A guy who comes in after midnight to work on glazes. He takes the same posture when he's on a call. I thought nothing of it then. She stopped. Her hands were clumsy all of a sudden, folding and unfolding the paper. Mark, both of us hiring PIs is embarrassing, but the fact that Russo's report contains footage from places neither of us remembers being watched, there's something else going on. The word sat in my throat like a stone. Something else. How do you mean? I asked. She leaned forward, elbows on the counter. Both reports have patterns, same blocks of time, same surveillance points, and both of them show footage from before any of us hired them. There's a photo in Russo's file of you getting coffee 3 months ago. You weren't suspicious then. You weren't dating anyone back then. You were just you. Russo's notes say he started monitoring you 3 weeks ago, but the timestamps on some of his files predate that by months. I swallowed. It felt like the floor had been knocked out. Are you saying that someone else was watching us before either of us paid a dime? She finished. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or throw the paper across the kitchen and watch it tear. Instead, I called Barnes. He picked up on the third ring. Did you talk to her? He asked without preamble. Yeah, she knows. She hired Russo. Silence on the line. Then, he's an asshole. A pause. But that's not what bothers me. Russo's notes. They say things that don't make sense. They reference meetings that predate his involvement. Like what? Barnes's voice dropped. Like months, Mr. Evans. For 10 minutes I thought I was reading a conspiracy novel. Then I checked my invoices. I have files. Lots of them. But Russo, he's got different footage. He's got images of you at places 2 months back. He even notes an encounter near the pottery studio in September, before either of you mentioned anything about me. So what are you saying? I breathed. I'm saying someone's been collecting footage on both of you for longer than you know, and Russo's included it, which either means he's been sloppy, or someone is feeding him old material to stitch into a narrative. His voice finally sounded tired. Either way, it complicates things. I hung up and stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Complicate. The word felt like a euphemism for collapse. That night, we did what people do when the edges of trust catch fire, we argued. Not the fling and flame sort of argument that ends with slamming doors and neat resolutions, but the slow, grinding kind that dredges up small cruelties and keeps at them until both of you feel hollowed out. You should have told me you were suspicious, I said. You should have asked. She countered, voice clipped. And you should have noticed something was wrong when I started leaving at midnight to glaze my pottery. I didn't want to tell you because I thought you were the kind of man who'd listen, so I hired someone. So, you hired a man to watch me, but you didn't tell me? I didn't think it would happen, she replied. I thought I was being paranoid, Mark, and I was embarrassed. I thought if I had proof, then I could talk to you. But now I don't know what to believe. When the words stopped, we sat in the quiet, like two people who had just been set adrift. The apartment felt echoey, like acoustics in a new room you haven't learned how to fill. 2 days later, I called Russo. The number rang and then went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. 3 days passed. I went into Barnes's office myself, unannounced, to ask about Russo and got a receptionist who said he'd left on an urgent matter and hadn't come back. Barnes said he'd try to reach him too, and then added a line that made my stomach drop. He's been hard to pin down. I saw him in the neighborhood yesterday, but he kept his head down and walked fast. If Russo had been trying to duck something, whoever he was running from was running harder. Something in me pushed back harder than the melancholy, not hysteria, but a stubborn animal need to know. If someone else was engineering the narrative, if old footage was being stitched into new evidence, I didn't want to be a passive subject. I wanted the seams to show. At 2 a.m, I drove to the pottery studio. It was a bad idea from the start, a cliche of noir thrillers, but cliches exist because they sometimes work. The studio sat in a narrow strip of brick warehouses, a single rectangular window barred with wire mesh. Beside it, a security light blinked every 30 seconds. A hand-lettered sign read, Clay Collective Open Late. Inside, the furnace shone like a mirage. Clay smudged faces bent over wheels. A man in a worn denim jacket stood at easel, shaping an unrecognizable vessel. It could have been anyone. I walked to the back, past the racks and the glaze bins, and there he was, the man she'd said I'd noticed before. Up close, he looked older, more ordinary than the camera had suggested, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing. He was not Russo. He was not Barnes. He was just a man shaping clay with a patience that made him look impossible to hurry. "Can I help you?" he asked when he saw me, voice not unkind. I blinked. No, sorry. I left without explanation. A small, foolish failure. On the drive back, I thought of a dozen questions to ask him that I had chickened out of. Do you come here often? Have you been paid to watch anyone? Do you know anything about cameras hidden in ceilings? Instead, I called a neighbor, Mrs. Lang, an elderly woman who watched everything on our block like a live cable feed. She answered on the first ring. "You look awful," she said, then asked about the weather like she always did. I told her I wanted to ask a favor. "That camera on your roof," she said, interrupting without prompting. "The one with the flicker?" I grew cold. "What camera?" "That one on the eaves. Been there weeks. I see it at night, shining sometimes. Figured it was for the parking lot, but now you say it's about you." She cut off, then added, "If you want, I have my binoculars. I can watch." My pulse threaded into my throat. "Please, just look. From the 3rd floor, the east window. If you see anything, call me," she promised. We hung up. 2 days later, she came over with her binoculars and a small notepad, both of which were gifts from a different century. She'd written down times, fields of numbers that seemed like static, until I realized they were timestamps. She'd watched men 2 different sets at the curb, at odd hours. At 3 a.m, standing under streetlights. She'd seen a van parked at the corner for 3 hours one Tuesday. She'd seen a man who matched the denim jacket step away from the pottery studio twice and look toward our house. "These people aren't random," she said, tapping her notes with a bony finger. "They come at nights, always different faces, sometimes the same. You two should be careful." Her bluntness was a small aligning force in the room. The pattern was forming like frost on glass. Back inside, Sarah stood at the window when I walked in. She'd called Barnes again, she said, and left messages with Russo's office. Barnes had called her back at noon to tell her he could reach Russo, but that Russo had mentioned a third party had been requesting archive footage. Someone else had been asking for old files, Barnes told her. Someone with a lawyer's email address. Someone with motive, means, and access. We looked at each other then, without making a sound that could be turned into a lie. The two of us, so tuned to suspicion, had been performed upon by someone clever enough to anticipate our mistrust and weaponize it. That night, I slept poorly. I dreamed of 2 men in suits stitching photographs together like a grotesque collage, adding dates and timestamps like punctuation. I woke up before dawn and found Sarah in the kitchen, pouring coffee like some timeless ritual. "Tomorrow," she said, simple as a promise, "we go to Russo's office together. If him and Barnes are playing 2 sides of the same game, we confront them. If not, we get a lawyer." When the morning came, I had a small, foolish hope that confronting 2 paid watchers with the people who paid them would collapse whatever tangled story someone had been weaving. I didn't know yet that confronting men who sell the idea of truth for money can sometimes uncover a larger truth no one is ready for. When the car turned off the main road and into the low, blocky complex where Russo's office was supposed to be, the part of me that still expected tidy answers felt foolish for hoping. The unit numbers were stamped in flaking paint along the corridor. A copy shop, a massage place, and then an empty storefront with a paper sign, Russo and Partners Private Investigations. The letters had been peeled off at least a month ago, dust in the windows, no lights. I parked, heart kicking like a trapped thing, and we walked up the cracked steps together. Sarah's hand found mine halfway there without either of us saying a word. It surprised me. The small, anchoring pressure of it felt like a benediction. The door was unlocked. Russo's chair sat crooked behind a cheap laminate desk, a mug with dried coffee inside, a calendar pinned to the wall with an October circled in pencil. It looked like someone had left in a hurry, but not with panic, just an ordinary leaving. I expected the usual. Files gone, a forwarding address scrawled on a napkin. I didn't expect papers spread across the floor, a trail leading to an open safe, and a USB stick lying on the carpet like a fingernail. "Careful," Sarah whispered. She was scanning with the look of someone who'd learned to read rooms that aren't for them. Barnes had been right about Russo being sloppy, but this was different. This wasn't a man covering his tracks. It was a ledger, left open. I picked up the USB. No label, no protection. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because curiosity is still harder to kill than sense, but I put it into my laptop and clicked. Folders, photos, invoices, annotations in Russo's loopy handwriting, names, dates, prices. A spreadsheet labeled Clients Archive Orders with rows of redacted names and columns of locations and timestamps. Some entries had been highlighted. There were entries for our street from months back. The same March date Mrs. Lang had noticed. The van, the man in the denim jacket. There were also lines that referenced archive requests. Pull all footage 2/1, 2/14. Stitch timeline. Deliver to secure email X. The email addresses were alphanumeric strings, but one column had been filled in with a phone number, a corporate number. I copied it into my phone. "You think Barnes would have this?" Sarah asked. "I don't know." The files were too neat and too broad. Russo's folders contained work Russo would do, but the archive requests those read like a client's brief. Some of the invoices had been paid by shell companies. Others were wire transfers from accounts labeled Trust, A. Harrison, and Trust, Benson, Foundation. Names that meant nothing to me but suggested money and precise intent. I scrolled further. There were photos of us taken long before either of us felt suspicious. Then a ring of notes in Russo's hand. Pre-install. Confirm camera placement client spec. Must be time to provoke suspicion. The words made a hard, cold sound in my mouth. Some client had paid to cultivate this narrative. Do you see this? Sarah said, pointing to a directory labeled Testbed Projects. It contained dozens of couples files. Each file was formatted the same. Initial intake, timeline, trigger points, escalation metrics, outcome. Under our file, someone had written high fidelity in red. My hands went numb. This isn't private work. This is a product. We read until the sun moved, and the building shifted from a shadow into a shape. Russo had been selling behavior, not just evidence. He had been stitching footage, filling in gaps with old clips to make a clearer story, then delivering the stitched narrative to clients who wanted to watch what would happen when two people stopped trusting one another. It was grotesque in its clinical efficiency. There was a folder at the end with a single email thread. It had been printed out, folded beneath the safe. The sender line read, "To archive at archive-pro.xyz. Subject, deliver. Evans divided by Harris scenario. Create provocation. The body, confirm. Plant minor evidence to generate suspicion. Maintain deniability. Do not engage directly. Monitor emotional escalation. Deliver footage at point of maximum plausibility. Compensation attached." The signature line read, "KM." The name meant nothing. The tone meant everything. I called Barnes from Russo's desk and left a message. "We found the USB. We need you here. Now." There was no answer. We drove back home the way we always drove the route, threaded with the same landmarks, the same grocery store, the same mailboxes, and yet everything felt different. The house looked smaller when we pulled into the drive. The neat suburban geometry seemed meant to contain something less tidy. We were quiet in the car, which felt like a courtesy and also like a punishment. Inside, Sarah locked the door and double-checked the windows like someone going through a safety checklist. "We should call the police," she said. "This is organized criminal behavior, evidence tampering, surveillance." I called Barnes. I'll call him again. My voice wouldn't be steady. Then we call Russo's number through Barnes. "We don't involve anyone until we know what we're dealing with." She folded her arms like she was bracing herself. Do you think this is about us? Or are we just one of many?" I didn't want to say we're a case study, but the files had said it clearly. I thought about all the nights I'd sat awake, imagining a lover, and all the times she'd told me she was working late. All the small lies we told ourselves to keep moving. They'd been curated, intentionally provoked. Someone had cultivated our mistrust as entertainment. or as a test. That KM, I said. We need to trace that email. Russo's records show outward payments, shell accounts, but there are wires. We follow the money. We spent the next day compiling everything Russo's files, Barnes' notes, misses, Lang's timestamps, the photos we'd printed from Barnes, the emailed report Russo had already sent Sarah that morning when he thought he'd nailed a case. We photographed every detail like people who'd learned, too late, how precious paper could be. Barnes returned my third call in the evening. His voice was not the same flat rasp. It had an edge. "Meet me at the diner across from the station in 30 minutes, he said, "and bring everything." At the diner, he sat in a booth and unfolded a newspaper like a man who wanted to seem casual, but his hands, usually steady, trembled slightly when he passed me a paper coffee cup. "You found Russo's files?" he asked. We did. I slid the USB across the vinyl. We found the project lists, the client briefs, the invoices. He didn't react with surprise. He reacted with something more private. "You were a test bed," he said simply. "And not the only one. We were—" He stopped. He looked old in that second. The kind of old that isn't measured in years, but in equation. Service rendered. Ethics retired. We were subcontracting archival pulls for a client network. Some rich organizations wanted behavioral footage. Russo specialized in stitching older footage into present narratives to make things more believable. I handled live tales. He handled background. "Why?" Sarah demanded. She'd come with me. Her voice was low but sharp. "Who pays for this?" Barnes stared at his coffee, then said, "Whoever pays to watch human dynamics. People buy influence, Miss Evans. They buy evidence. They buy proof that suspicions are true either to convince themselves or to manipulate outcomes for contracts, divorces, lawsuits, political leverage. The market, it's worse than you think." Sarah's face went slack. "Is this legal?" He barked a short laugh. "Legality is a spectrum. There are ways to make everything look above board." He tapped the list of shell companies on Russo's spreadsheet. "Look at these. Fronts, trustees, foundations. The money moved through legitimate banks, wire transfers, invoices, tax forms, legality in the ledger, immorality in practice." "And Russo?" I asked. "Where is he?" Barnes shrugged. "He's gone dark. Could be he's preparing for a subpoena. Could be he's long gone. Or he's waiting to see which of us calls law enforcement first. Men like him don't leave breadcrumbs if they can help it." We sat with that for a long time. The diner hum faded into background noise. When we left, Barnes pressed a wrinkled card into my hand. "If you want to pursue it legally, you'll need a civil attorney who knows how to subpoena financials. Don't talk to the press. Don't delete anything. And don't let yourselves be baited into confrontation. These folks, whoever KM is, they want reactions." On the drive home, Sarah turned the steering wheel with a steadiness I hadn't seen in days. "We're going to get a lawyer," she said. "We're going to go through bank statements." Her jaw set. "We're going to file a complaint and demand disclosure." "And if the lawyer says it's legal?" I asked. "If they say there's nothing actionable because everything was paid to a shell with a legal invoice?" She looked at me like she'd decided something that would be a relief and a burden at once. "Then we live with it, but we will know they did it, and knowing is different." That night, alone in the kitchen while Sarah slept, I opened the USB again. One folder I hadn't noticed before sat at the top level. Delivery, logs divided by K, M divided by read, me. I clicked it and found a single PDF, password protected. The file name was a date, 11/7, delivery, PDF. The password was in Russo's handwriting scrawled on a post. It stuck to the underside of the keyboard in his office. Evans, Harris. Someone had been sloppy after all. The PDF opened to a cover page. Confidential Delivery Evans, divided by Harris deliverable package. Below it, a single line of text. For research purposes only. Client, KM. Confirm receipt, review for plausibility, and respond with a narrative assessment. Emphasize plausible deniability. Beneath that line, a chain of emails. The first sender, km@km-ventures.com. The message read, delivered as requested. Escalation timeline attached. We expect measurable distress between parties within 4-6 weeks. Please advise on further provocations to increase fidelity. The reply came from an address I'd never seen before, but which included a corporate footer and a quote, "On behalf of board, continue phased rollout. Maintain deniability. A divided by B test outcomes." My hands shook so badly I almost couldn't scroll. There were invoices attached. There were line items, plant evidence, archive stitching, audio enhancement, emotional monitoring. The total was 6 figures. I sat back, the kitchen ceiling blurred. Who the hell pays to watch two people fall apart? We brought the PDF to our lawyer the next morning, and she didn't blink. "This is big," she said, which was lawyer. Speak for expensive and messy. She tapped through the emails, then leaned in. KM, that's a traceable domain. It's registered through a privacy registrar, but lawyers dig. Subpoenas dig deeper. You can pursue this civilly. Criminally? Maybe. It depends on whether anything here crosses wiretapping, trespass, or stalking statutes. But financially, you've got paperwork. You've got invoices. That's a lever. When you're a stunned participant in someone else's experiment, leverage feels like oxygen. The suit we served had the expected effect. Banks froze a few shell accounts. Lawyers from consultancies started answering calls. Russo's name came up in deposition, a man who had maintained plausible deniability while making a tidy income off people's private misery. Barnes, to his credit, helped us trace payments to a firm named KM Ventures, tied to a private equity type who liked human behavior studies. The trail ended in a conference room in a high-rise downtown where the final invoice had been signed. We filed subpoenas. We sent cease and desists. We demanded information. And the world which had once felt like a neat suburban plastic model showed its seams. People from our lives called, neighbors with odd observations, coworkers with passing doubts, clients at my firm who wanted reassurance that I was still reliable. The press, inevitably, smelled blood and nosed around. Our lawyer told us to refuse comment. She also advised that the best public posture was dignity and privacy. Dignity is a behavior. Privacy is a process. Then, 3 days after the subpoenas, Barnes vanished. It wasn't dramatic. He told Sarah to meet him at his office for a quick handoff. She went. He didn't answer her calls. His voicemail greeted us for a week and then cut off. His office had a note telling clients that the agency was temporarily suspended due to internal restructuring. Boxes stacked behind the door. No forwarding address. When we went to his apartment, his neighbor told us Barnes had left in the middle of the night, a duffel and 3 cardboard boxes. He'd said, "I'm not safe here," and had been gone. The police put a note on file. Missing person report. The file was thin. People in Barnes's world disappeared. Sometimes heavy secrets accumulate that attract trouble. Barnes had been complicit. He'd subcontracted to Russo, sold archive pulls to KM, but he'd also helped us find the papers. He'd told us things nobody else would, who paid what and where it had flowed. He'd also made enemies. When someone who knows too much goes missing, the next step is always to consider who benefits. We slept in shifts for a week, then stopped sleeping at all. The house changed color. Our neighbor, Mrs. Lang, kept bringing over chicken soup and more binocular entries. She'd started to take photos from her window and deliver them in a careful, old-fashioned way, envelopes slipped under the door. She found a man she hadn't noticed before, walking late, sometimes with a tripod. She wrote down license plate numbers. We began giving the list to our lawyer and to the detective she'd hired. The subpoenas did something that surprised us. They created a visible pressure. Banks unspooled transactions. A lawyer for KM Ventures asked for a meeting. At that meeting, in a room smelled of lemon cleaner and cold leather, the representative was careful and politely opaque. He couldn't legally admit to commissioning what Russo and Barnes had provided, but he didn't deny the existence of behavioral testing as a market. "There's nothing illegal about commissioning archival footage for market research," he said. "We test narratives. We study human response to stimuli. It's ethnography with outcomes. We didn't intend harm." They never used the word manipulate. KM Ventures offered to settle. The amount was large enough to make us nauseous. Our lawyer said it was a good offer. Public closure, funds to start again, and a non-disclosure agreement that would protect us from more of their research. The ethical decision whether to take money from the people who tortured you felt obscene. Sarah and I argued about it like older, careful diplomats. In the end, we took it. Not because we forgave them, not because the money was convincing, or because the NDA felt like protection. We took it because every deposit into our account felt like a small shell that would let us rebuild. We were tired. We were raw. We wanted to stop being case studies. The settlement came with a clause that KM Ventures would surrender all archived footage to a court-approved repository, and that Russergiu would be compelled to testify about his methods. Russo's silence had gotten him noticed. Subpoenas create pressure, and pressure makes things move. When we finally sat down in a courtroom months later, Russo arrived gaunt, sheepish, and under a different kind of duress. He admitted he'd stitched footage under direction and confessed the mechanics. He was not convicted of anything the law loves, plausible deniability, but his agency was fined, and the court ordered a partial purge of the archives. Barnes's disappearance was never solved. He was never found. After the legal dust settled, once the cameras and invoices and forensic analyses had been photographed and rephotographed and loaded into evidence boxes, Sarah and I were left with a new, weirder problem: how to live inside a life that had been curated to fail. We had the money, We had the papers. We had a court decision that said, roughly, that what had been done to us was wrong enough to punish a company and shame a practice. But the surveillance had taught us how fragile a marriage could be when fed a constant diet of suspicion. So we did the only civil thing left to do. We sat down and read everything Russo had stitched together. We watched the footage, not for evidence, but because, perversely, knowledge felt like control. We watched the edits. We saw the moments they'd left alone, tender, unmanufactured seconds of us laughing in the kitchen over bad cereal. The way Sarah always nursed a chipped mug. The way I always tried and failed to fold fitted sheets. Those were ours. The constructed scenes were the intrusions. A looped clip here, an audio cut there, a timestamp changed, an old camera angle repurposed. We cataloged them and we burned the prints that had been delivered to our house. We seized every physical piece of evidence we could find and fed it to the garbage disposal, then the burn barrel in the backyard, then the compost heap. We staged a kind of small purge ritual that felt satisfyingly domestic. On the last night of the purge, after the embers went out, Sarah sat on the back stoop and passed me a small square of metal. "What's this?" I asked. She put it in my palm. It was tiny, a memory card, no more than thumb-sized, labeled in faded ink, E+SKM deltas. Her hands weren't steady. "I found this in the lining of my pottery bag," she said, "when I was cleaning studio shelves." We both looked at it like it could explode. We took it inside and opened it on the laptop. The files inside were raw and messy, not dried and stitched like Russo's work, a jumble of late-night takes. Us sleeping, me arguing on a muted phone, Sarah arranging clay, a man in a denim jacket walking past the house. But there were also files that made us both stop. A video clip of Barnes alive, sitting in a diner across from a man in a suit, handing over a USB and saying, "You'll get better offers if you keep the tension up." It ended with Barnes looking directly at the camera, then sliding out through the diner door. We watched again. Maybe we watched it 10 times, because denial is a loop too. "What does it mean?" I said finally. Sarah's face was a map of the last 2 months, exhaustion underlined with a resolve that had been newly fanned. "It means we were bait," she said. "It means Russo and Barnes weren't just perpetrators. They were performers in a larger show. Someone higher up bought this entire thing as kitsch. 2 people falling apart for entertainment. Who pays for that?" I asked, voice low. She shrugged. "People who can. People who want to see if suspicion makes truth. People who prefer data to discomfort. People who think they can manage consequences." We sat there, the light of the laptop making small ghosts on the ceiling. For the first time in months, we didn't argue. We did not try to decide whether we loved each other in a way that could be reclaimed. We simply sat and listened to the house breathe us. When the legal case finally closed with its small court-ordered purges and its fine against Russo, we could have gone public and torn the story wide open with op-eds about surveillance, culture, and private police, and the sale of intimacy. But the settlement came with a non-disclosure that included a nominal clause, allowing us to speak as long as we didn't identify names. That didn't feel like victory. Instead, we chose to live. We moved 3 towns over, new neighborhood, no pottery studio downtown. We paid cash for a house with smaller windows and no eaves to hang cameras. We replaced the router and made the Wi-Fi password a long, nonsense string we wrote in a book and hid behind the press-on spice rack. It felt absurd and utterly necessary. We had the money to do it. The psychological repairs took longer. We attended counseling not to litigate the past, but to find new languages for ordinary acts. How to say, "I'm worried," without saying you're the enemy. How to ask, "Where were you last night?" without asking, "Did you betray me?" Therapy was practical and boring, which is precisely what we needed. We learned how to keep secrets only when they were good for us, a surprise birthday, a small purchase, and to name everything else. Months later, when the immediacy of the case faded into a background hum of receipts and closed files, I found something else in the junk drawer, where we kept odds and ends. A small brass tag with a single stamped line, KMDLT Arch, returned to sender. Someone had been sloppy twice. We never unmasked KM fully. The company's board shuffled, the PR releases were tidy, and the industry moved on with an apology and small policy changes. But the cameras and the invoices and the archival requests had already done their work. On nights when the house is too quiet, I still reach for the bedroom light, half expecting a camera's eye to blink somewhere beyond the curtains. Most nights there's nothing, only the ordinary sigh of plumbing and the distant, comforting rumble of the highway. Sometimes Sarah will wake, and in that small, unguarded, waking window, we'll cut each other slack. "You were out late," she'll say. "I know," I'll answer. "I just didn't tell you." We don't ask why anymore. We ask who paid to watch us. And sometimes, when the question hangs in the dark, the answer matters less than the fact we ask it together.